Hi, I'm Josh Juno, and today I'll be presenting Jakarta EE Recipes. And this session is going to be covering lots about Jakarta EE, just a general overview. So let's go ahead and get started. Just a little bit about me. I'm a Jakarta EE and Java EE developer. I'm also an Oracle DBA, and I've authored quite a few books for Apress and also do some articles for Oracle. I'm a member of the Apache NetBeans PMC. I work on basically the Apache NetBeans Jakarta EE support. I'm a Java champion, and I'm a regular on the Offheap and Stacked podcasts. So like I was mentioning today, we're just going to go ahead and give a pretty broad overview of some of the features of Jakarta EE. And it's going to be kind of a code-driven overview. I'm going to run some slides. We're going to get to some problems, some solutions, and then I'll show you how it works on the screen. We're going to be using the NetBeans IDE today. However, any of the examples that I'm showing can be used in another IDE if you would wish. And hopefully we'll be able to demonstrate some useful techniques for you today. If you want to go ahead and get started with Jakarta EE, we will be using Pyara 5 here today, and that will allow us to run Jakarta EE9.1 using, the Eclipse transformer. So, but you can also download Glassfish 6, and like I said, Pyara 5 is usable for Jakarta EE 8, 9, and 9.1, and we can use JDK 11 with that as well. The Eclipse transformer will automatically transform any code to the Jakarta namespace for us, so we don't have to worry about that. And it's integrated with Pyara 5, so it's pretty nice. I'll be using version 5.2021.8 for this session. And also, if you'd like to get started, you can go ahead and get a Maven archetype from GitHub. You can see I've got a link to that here in the presentation. There's also a starter project at start.jakarta.ee. So that works out quite well as well. And then you can download and put that into any IDE and just go ahead and get started coding. Real briefly, just so you know, the main difference between Jakarta EE 8 and Jakarta EE 9 is that the namespace has changed from the Java X to Jakarta. So if you weren't aware of that, that is going to it's going to make you change your code in your imports so that you're not any longer referencing the Java X namespace, but now the Jakarta namespace. And this can take a little while to do for your code, but there are some IDE tools that are available which will help you make the change. And like I said, also the Eclipse transformer. I believe Apache may also have some kind of a conversion process for you. Now, just so you know, Jakarta EE 9.1 basically adds compatibility with Java 11. Those are the main differences. And like I was mentioning, the transformer, it goes ahead and mutates class files at runtime to automatically rename the imports and references. So this can all be done for you. And it kind of work along with your dependencies as well. So it works quite well. Best practice is to use this in testing, test your code out, and then make sure that you go ahead and actually manually change all your imports for production, just to be safe. And Jakarta EE 9.1 for compatibility, here's a list of some of the servers. Like I said, we've got Pyara 5, Eclipse Glassfish, and just so you know, Pyara 6 is on the way. That will support Jakarta EE 9.1. So let's go ahead and get started with some recipes. Now, just so you know, the recipes are not meant to be a comprehensive example at all. It's going to just show you a problem, solution, and then we're going to show how it works. I'm not going to get into the major details of any of the APIs today, just basically so that we can save some time and get through as many examples as possible. Just a little bit about the example here. there are 3 services in this example, and I'm not using any microservice architecture at all here, primarily in the essence of just trying to make this work easily on my machine. I'm go ahead and I'm just going to deploy to Pyra server today, full server. But there is a client front end, an event service, and a database service, and these can all be deployed and managed separately using Kubernetes and Docker, however you'd like. And the code is available on GitHub. So first off, let's just go ahead and answer the basics question. You'd like to create a Jakarta EE service and obtain some data from an enterprise data store. And then once we do that, we want to make it available via REST. We can utilize the Jakarta Persistence API and Enterprise Java Beans to obtain the data, query it, do what we need, and then we can use Jakarta REST to make the data available for consumption. And the way we'll do this is we will map an entity class to the database table, and then we'll utilize a stateless bean to query the, in this case, employees from our database. And then we'll just make the results available via REST. So let's go ahead and take a look at how this is done. I apologize for that. We'll go ahead and we'll start this presentation over again. I apologize for the delay here. This is basically for Jakarta EE Recipes. We're going to go ahead and give a brief overview of different examples. And I already had given you a little bit of information about me. And so we'll just go ahead and get into this code so I can show you the examples. Now, I'm going to jump down here since I've already talked about Jakarta EE, and you probably have heard what I've said. So what we're going to do is just get into the example, and just so you can see the slide, the client front end, the event service, and database service, these are all available on GitHub, so you can look at that link. And so basically this first problem and the solution that we're going to show is how do we create this web service. Now, what I'm going to do is, like I had mentioned before, utilize NetBeans, and I've got this service that is called the employee service. And I know it's kind of hard to see on the right-hand side menu, but basically what this consists of is a EJB, stateless EJB, which I will use to query. And also I have a entity class. This is going to map to a database table called Acme employee. Okay. And basically those just map to the columns, as you can see with the column annotation. And then when I go ahead and do my query, this query here is going to occur within the find by last, or excuse me, actually, that's one way you can write a query. You can pass in using a path parameter, and I would query an employee based upon last name. The one I'm going to show you is actually find all. This is just going to return all the employees. I'm going to use the entity manager to create a query, and I'm going to just return the result list. And what I'm doing is using Jakarta REST to actually make this available for the client. So I have to use this config class to configure the Jakarta REST, and I'm going to use REST as my URL endpoint there to invoke REST, and then it's going to map to this path for the Acme employee service. And let's go ahead and see that in action now. I've got the database up and running. And so what this will do is query, and it will show the employees right here. And you can't see anything happening on your screen, but actually what is occurring is this is bringing up all of the data from the service. And here is the raw XML that you would see. So when I'm querying this service, I'm using the endpoint to obtain the data. And then the next thing we would like to do probably is to make this available via front end. Now, I showed you briefly the front end, but basically what I've done is I've used Jakarta server faces to create a front end and consume the data. And then we use the Jakarta REST client to obtain that and put it into a controller, and then throw it into a list. And then I go ahead and I show that with a data table. In this case, I'm using prime faces. So let's go ahead and show how I've done that. So if I go back to my code here, I'm going to go to the employee client service, and I'm going to go on to my index.html. This is the view, okay? And basically what we are going to show here is that this data table is called the emp table. And what I'm doing is I'm getting these items, which if I go back to my view controller, then I can see it's just a list of employees, okay? And it's going to display the employees to my view. So what happens when I load this view? It's view scoped. So what that causes to occur is that it will initialize every time the view is shown. And what I've got going on is a annotation called post construct, and this is going to initialize the data, and it's going to set it into this items. So I use a Jakarta REST client, and this path is, in this situation, I'm using a string-based path, but you could use something like microprofile config to obtain a URL to use for your REST path. And then I just get the employees and I put them into items, and you can see that that is now showing in my data table here. Pretty quick and easy. So let's go ahead and get to the next recipe. So in this situation, what we would like to do is enter an employee into the database. And when I'm doing that, I want to use a Cdi event to initiate a message, let's say, to indicate that the employee has been entered. So in the solution here, what we're going to do is we're going to fire an event using CDI and call upon fire async method when passing the event class. Basically, the employee event class is just a POJO. I'll show you that in a second. You can take any plain old Java class and pass it in as a payload, and then call upon the fire async. And what it's going to do is it's going to call upon any method that's annotated with the observe async and any qualifiers. In this case, I've got a new hire qualifier that I've created, and then it's going to call that event in the background. And this utilizes the Java 8 asynchronous API, so it's very similar if you've used that. And like I said, the observe async annotation is added to the annotate and observer method parameter, so that existing observers annotated would remain synchronous, because you can do that with just observes as well. Let's go ahead and take a look at this in action. So let's go back to my code here. Or actually, what I'll do is I'll show you the entry first. So if I go down to the bottom here, let's say I want to add Jakarta rocks, and then I'm going to make the age, we'll make it 25 because it's a young one. And then we'll go ahead and we'll say that it's started on that day. So we can see that it's successfully now created the employee. It's gone into the table. The view is refreshed just because of what I've got going on behind the scenes here. Let's go ahead and take a look at that code. So here is the form to initiate a CDI event. And basically what I'm doing is I map these fields to the controller class and to the fields where it can be added into the employee entity. And then I call upon this method that's just Acme employee controller create. And basically what this is going to do here is submit by creating a Jakarta REST client. I get this client by calling upon client builder, new client, and then I create a form. This is a Jakarta REST form, and I populate it with those values that were brought in through the form. And then I can go ahead and I can initiate this and call upon that REST endpoint, which will then insert that data into the database. And I get a response back. And in this case, I check to make sure that the response is good. It's been created and okay. And if that's the case, then what I'm going to do is set up a payload. And this is just like I said, in plain old Java object, this employee event. And basically, I'm going to populate this payload, and I'm going to call upon fire async. Something that's important here is that the employee event that I'm calling upon is injected. And you can see what I've done here at the top of the controller class. I've injected an employee event. It's just a Jakarta EE Event object, and I've made it type of employee event. What I've done here is I've qualified this with this new hire annotation. Let me go ahead and show you that. So I've got this regular annotation I've created to qualifier. And what I also have is this employee event handler. This is just an interface, and it's got a one definition, notify manager, and it accepts an employee event. And what I've got here is I've also coded a new hire event handler, and this implements the employee event handler. And as you can see, it's got the observes async and the new hire annotations to qualify it. And if we look down here in my output, you can see at the bottom, sending notification to manager. This was called right here. Okay, so that called upon the event. All right, let's go ahead and go back to the presentation. And so now what we'd like to do is read in a JSON document and map it to a Java class or POJO. So you can utilize the Json Binding to make this happen. Basically, you can use the JSON B builder to create a JSON B object. And then we can go ahead and map any text to a Java class and then convert it automatically. And you can kind of see here in this little diagram that the entity class and shows you how you can populate this POJO and then convert it into JSON very easily. And here's a little bit about the code. This would show how to populate a POJO called member, set the first and last name, and then you get that JSON B object, and then you call upon it and initiate the toJSON method passing this object, and that will create the JSON. Let's go ahead and show you how this works a little bit. So if I go back to my JSON examples here, what I'm going to do here is create JSON. When I do that, I'm clicking on a button. It doesn't look like much here, but I'm displaying JSON for all the employees that are in the database. And I'll show you how that works. So if I go to the tab, JSON examples, and I click on this method, what you can see is occurring here is I'm creating that JSON B object. I call it toJSON, and then I'm passing the items that I showed you earlier, how I populate with all of the records. And then I set the return message to the result, which is therefore displaying on screen. Back to the presentation here. So it's also possible to create a JSON from a Java list. You can have quite a few different objects in a list, an array list, and then you can call upon the same JSON B toJSON method passing the list, and it will return the result, as you can see. This provides serialization and deserialization operations for manipulating JSON documents to Java. There's default mapping, very easy to use, but you can use this JSON config class at runtime for mapping customizations if that has to occur, if there's some special Java types that you want to map or something like that. So what happens if you're interested in finding a specific value within a JSON document? What I mean is you want to point to a specific element within that JSON document. You can do that with what's called a Json Pointer. As you can see, in this situation, we would want to find the mobile element. And what I can do is I can create a Json Pointer to find that specific element, and then I can get the value of that element as well. So how does it work? You create this new Json Pointer object, and you pass a string that will signify the element you're trying to identify. And then you just call upon the get value, as I had mentioned, and that will return to you a JSON value. Now, let's go ahead and we'll jump to the next, just so we can be quicker on time. This kind of corresponds to that same recipe. We'd like to perform an operation to a specified value in a JSON document. And what I mean is what we'd like to do is change that value. We can utilize Jsonpatch to replace a specified value within a JSON document with some other value. So in this case, we've got, let's say, the first string there that you see. What I can do is I can pass a patch, which I would change the operation of replace, and I would take a look at the path and change the, let's say, the BAZ with a new value of boo. And then if you go down, we want to add a new value with a path of hello and the value of world, and then remove the foo path. So at the bottom would be the result there. You would have the value would be changed for the BAZ, and then there would be a new path, hello, in the world. So you can see how we've done this here. Basically, the beginning is creating a JSON object, but then if you look down towards the bottom of this code, we've got this Jsonpatch builder, and you just basically add the path that you're looking. And in this case, I want to add a new object, a new value in there at that path. So what that Jsonpatch is going to do is just apply it at the bottom when you call upon apply, and then pass the model. So we use this Jsonpatch builder object to make this happen, and along with the Json pointer. Let me go ahead and show you real quickly how that happens. So if I take a look here, in this case, I want to search for a particular index, and let's say I want to pass replacement JSON of test. So as you can see at the bottom here, I know it's maybe a little hard to see, but test shows up here as the second element. If I change this to a 0, then that should show up as the first element now, because I'm pointing to the index of 0 here. How does that work? Let's go ahead and take a quick look here. So I'm basically mapping, again, these fields to the controller class. And it allows me to go ahead and use this JSON array. I build all the objects from the database, and then I can go ahead and replace in that array anything that is going to match what I've passed in. Replacement string is actually the field that I've passed in. And if I don't have anything that I've typed in to this particular value, then it's going to replace it with JSON expert. So let's say if I take test out, you can see that JSON expert now appears there. Let's go ahead and just quickly go to the next one. I know the time is now running out. So this is the last recipe. I'm going to show you Jakarta Concurrency very quickly. We want to load some data in the background, okay? For instance, in some situation where you may not want to have the person waiting for the page to fresh up with all the data. So we can utilize Jakarta Concurrency to make this happen. We can use a callable task and spawn that off to what's called a managed executor service on the server. There have been other sessions in Eclipse Con here that have talked about Jakarta Concurrency. Very useful. There are different ways you can do this. You can use a thread factory. You can use the managed executor service. You can schedule it using the schedule managed executor service. And what I'm doing here in this situation, I'm going to use a client-side polling mechanism to read and make sure that future object has been read. So what we're going to see here is the page just loads. And in the background, what's happening is if I quickly look at this concurrent table, what I've got going on is I'm loading this employee data in the background. And I'm calling upon this default manager executor service submit, and I submit this employee's callable. What this is just basically a class that is implementing callable, and it's going to call upon and return the employees. And what happens is I'm calling this polling mechanism on the front end to just check the status of the feature. Once it's done, it goes ahead and displays the results. So that's about all I've got time for today. I would like to answer any questions if you have any. So one question would be, what are the best practices of Jakarta EE testing? Any recommended testing framework? Sure. What I've done in the past is utilized Archillion to go ahead and set up tests. You can use that to test with JUnit, and then it's very basic. I can tell you that setting up Archillion can take a little bit of time because it's a matter of getting all the dependencies correct so that everything aligns correctly. Once you have that set up, you can set up tests that can run when you build your code, and then it will go ahead and either pass or fail at that point. And then that's a great indicator as if your code's working. Look into Archillion. That would be my recommendation. Question 2, I have a problem to send a list of file and list of fields in one request. JSONB cannot map all of them. I have to send one file and a list of fields. Do you have a suggestion for this problem? Try and use the JSON config to configure that object, and you can probably map it to whatever data types you're looking to do. It may take a little while to get that configuration just right, but you should be able to tweak it to your means. Question 3, does Jakarta EE Recipes work with Java 17? Actually, at this point, it shouldn't be hard to make it work. What you'll have to do is obviously recompile it under Java 17, and then you can run it on a Java 17 compliant server. Right now, I'm running on Pyra, which is not yet Java 17 compliant. Are there any alternatives to Jakarta server faces in Jakarta EE? Okay, so yeah, there are. Actually, you can use quite a few other frameworks, but the one that we like to use is the MVC. That's part of the Eclipse Foundation as well, and Enterprise EE4J. And you can go ahead and use MVC as more of a model view controller type action-based framework. So every time you call upon that page, it calls and gets the request. It's kind of like an action-based framework more so. And that's included in Glassfish as well since 6.1, just so you know. So you've got a couple of different options. Other option would be to use something like Angular. You could use Angular for a front end, or if you like to stick with Java, something like Vaadin would also work. So very, very many different possibilities for the front end. So if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer. I want to apologize again for not sharing my beginning of the presentation, but I will make the slides available. They're going to be available for you to go ahead and see. Just so you know, the Jakarta EE10 is scheduled for Q1 of 2022, and that is going to actually have lots of new enhancements to these APIs I've shown today. So definitely pay attention to that so that you can get in touch with the latest. And also the other thing that is great with Jakarta EE10 is that it should be Java 17 compatible. Actually, right now, if you take your code for Jakarta EE9, you should be able to run it on any Java 17 compatible server. You just have to compile it accordingly. So very important. And then if you'd like to get involved with helping with Jakarta EE, definitely join the community and get involved with the mailing list, I would say, first, and start to look at those. Lots of messages always coming back and forth. Lots of community meetings where you can actually have some input on what's going into Jakarta EE. Very important to stay into that. And you can actually influence the future of Jakarta EE and make a big difference. So I think that's all I've got for today. I really appreciate your time. I'll put the slides out for you to go ahead and grab if you'd like to, and also the examples are on GitHub. So I appreciate your time today.